Dad decided not to get an Icon Pass this year. Instead, we're making home movies in the garage.
Cut!
But every movie he makes is about skiing. Why didn't you just get the Icon Pass?
Why do you keep bringing that up?
To be honest, I'm a little worried about him.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Outdoor Retailer Winter Market. We're excited here to be kicking off day one of the virtual summit. My name is Jeanine Pesce. I'm the founder and creative director of Range. We're a creative consulting agency specializing in trend forecasting, strategy, and content development. Our session today is called On the Horizon, presented by Range. I'll be chatting with two insightful industry vets, Michael Bronner, president of Dr. Bronners, and Jeanine Pesce, CEO of Lab Holding and Seed People's Market. We'll be having an in-depth conversation about what to watch, what you didn't see coming, and what's next for the outdoor industry. These are topics we cover in our weekly newsletter called the Horizon Report. The Horizon Report presents immediate cultural shifts and consumer insights for the outdoor active, wellness, and lifestyle markets. It's for industry insiders, creative professionals, key stakeholders, and fearless founders. It's packed with actionable intelligence and empathetic insights to help you determine needs versus wants while developing a deeper understanding of your future consumer. It's what to watch, why it matters, and how to take action. We're here today with Michael and Jeanine, and I'd like to take the opportunity to have them introduce themselves. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Jeanine, and thank you so much for having me here. My name is Michael Bronner. I'm president of Dr. Bronners. I'm a fifth-generation soap maker. Our family has been making soap since 1858, and currently we have a line of organic liquid soaps, bar soaps, hand sanitizers, personal care, and I'm excited to be here.
Jeanine, would you please introduce yourself to the community in the audience?
Yes, my name is Jeanine Pesce. I am the president and CEO of Lab Holding, LLC, which is the founder of Seed People's Market, which is a 12,000 square foot outdoor and lifestyle retail store here in Orange County, California.
Well, let's just jump right into it, guys. I'm really excited to have both of you here. I know it's been quite an interesting year with lots of highs and lows. We are going to approach this interview in three different categories. We're going to start with what to watch. So what to watch questions are emerging movements that are relevant to your business and also relevant to the industry. So both Dr. Bronners and Seed obviously have a lot of experience in the sustainability sector. In issue 2 of the Horizon Report, which was called Sustain the Future, we really started to dig into what's working, what isn't working, and how we can create more sustainable futures. So my question for both of you gentlemen is, what role does sustainability play in your businesses, and is it having an impact on the way your consumers engage with your brand? Basically, because you're both purpose-driven brands, is that also helping to shape positive consumer behaviors?
That's a great question, Jeanine. Sustainability is built into everything we do. Our customers expect nothing less than us to take every single action we can take in a sustainable direction. They've lost faith in government leaders in order to take that step. So it's kind of up to us to fill that gap in brands in our field. And in a truly sustainable company, everything connects, right? You don't think of sustainability even in the triple bottom line. You don't think of your business first, and then you think of sustainability, then you think of the employees and the social aspects. Instead, when it comes to your supply chain, you want to make sure that's sustainable. When it comes to how you're developing your products, you want to make sure that entire process has sustainability built into it. And when you are considering the life cycle of how you make the products and how the customers use them, you need to be sustainably minded, and our customers expect nothing less.
Awesome. You have, and Dr. Bronners has obviously been at the forefront of this movement for quite some time and been owning it authentically, and that's really, really important. Jeanine, when you started Seed Market quite some time ago now, was sustainability always built into the, kind of mission statement of the store? And how did that kind of start to unfold?
Well, our story actually is it's a little deeper, but so we decided to build sustainable product, and back then when we decided this, the green wasn't even a vocabulary, quite honestly, back in 1999. So we built the first sustainable retail complex in the U.S. It's in Costa Mesa, California. It's called the Camp, and the Camp project at the time really used the most sort of sophisticated tools available. For example, all of the water on the project is basically filtered through a percolation system, so nothing gets washed to the oceans. We implemented grass roofs and recycled materials and so forth. This project actually went on drawing in 1999, and we opened for business in 2002. And so we dedicated ourselves to looking at the future and really being clear as to what people wanted and what was happening within the American cultural landscape in terms of just being more responsible. And as Michael alluded to, really in all aspects, it wasn't necessarily sort of zeroed in on one or two things. And then once we built the center some years after, so I guess Seed is about 10 years now, we decided to build our own retail store and focus on sustainable products. And the tagline for our store is products with a purpose. Understanding that, we weren't necessarily interested in sort of fashion business or just selling stuff to people. We were really looking at the products that had a purpose, and each vendor that we select really has to fit within that criteria. And the good news is, over the years, obviously, it's sort of a mainstream expectation now. I think it sort of falls under the trust category within the consumer. I know at first when we opened, I'm not really sure if a lot of people understood what we were trying to do. But today, I think it's not necessarily a luxury or an added sort of bonus. I think people expect it. And I think we've been fortunate because as the OR industry, I think in some ways has organically been in the sustainable business. I would obviously have to mention Patagonia, which is one of our largest product categories that we sell, and they've really been the leaders and done so much. So I think that's just made our work a lot easier.
So it's funny because, I started presenting at Outdoor Retailer in 2005, and at the time I was talking about trends, and a lot of that was about sustainability and the green movement that was emerging. And I do remember standing up in front of, the convention center, ballroom where we would do the presentations, and I would start talking about that, and people would look at me like I was crazy, like, what do you mean green, or what do you mean sustainable? What's recyclable? And it's just really interesting to see how far we've come. But I also think, to your point, Jeanine, the outdoor industry, again, that conversation I was having was 2005. Your store opened in 2002. We've been doing this. We've been having these conversations, and it's inherently built into the DNA and the foundational mission of a lot of the outdoor space. And I think that we're really lucky to be ahead of the curve because we've had a lot of time to kind of refine our approaches. And that's really interesting. And I do think a lot of other industries are looking to us for guidance in terms of either course correcting or starting down that path towards a more sustainable future. So it's really interesting. So my next question is, could be a little bit controversial. We've obviously had an incredibly tumultuous year when it comes to the state of the health of the world, social unrest, and racial injustice within the United States. In issue 4 of the Horizon report called In Solidarity, we tackled some of these really difficult topics, discussing reform and how we can provide moral leadership to consumers because we know they are looking for it. So my question to both of you gentlemen is, what is the responsibility of brands and retailers when it comes to taking a public stance on social justice and DEI? What does accountability look like? And I know that both Michael and Jeanine, you're both pretty, your brands are progressive by nature. And I'm wondering if it presents a more approachable way in because you've already taken some of those public stances. Michael, maybe we can start with you because Dr. Bronners has such a longstanding history of being vocal about social justice and equity.
Sure. Yes, and what you say is absolutely correct. We're looking at a world where it's now the banks who are withdrawing support from certain presidents in order to really drive accountability forward, and that's because the government right now is just kind of completely gridlocked and not really doing anything. So it is up to brands. It's up to private entities to try to figure out a way to make this world work. And for Dr. Bronners, from the very beginning, my grandfather put his philosophy on the bottle of soap. And the reason he put his philosophy, his social, the philosophy of uniting the world through advocating for our common humanity versus labels of black or white or Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist that were fundamentally all one. And an environmental aspect that we need to take care of the world. The reason he put this philosophy on the bottle is because people were coming to listen to him talk about this philosophy, and then he would give them some soap, and they would just take the soap and leave without listening to him. So our brand started because the soap needed to be a vehicle for the message of just we all need to come together. And we've taken that same philosophy of what is on the label, what do we stand for, and applied that to everything we do, whether that's going organic to the food standard as a soap. We're certified as if we were soup, even though please don't drink our soap. And then going fair trade so that we could cover the social aspects as well, because just because something's organic doesn't mean that the farmers are getting paid more or that kids aren't pulling weeds. So what we do and we have been doing in the last 10 years is actually changing our label to stand behind policies that we want to put in action. And for example, one that was quite controversial 5 years ago, we changed our whole label to Fair Pay Today to support raising the minimum wage, raising the federal minimum wage and the state minimum wage. And, that's a very controversial stance. When we talk about GMOs and we talk about, organic standards, it's something that most stores get behind, right? Especially since, our bread and butter is a natural market. You start talking about raising a minimum wage and, that's not as, that's a little more spicy, right? And, we did see a lot of people on social media criticizing us for taking such a bold stance. But I think, well, first of all, the campaign was very successful because minimum wage laws were passed throughout the country. But secondly, I think that, even if you don't agree with a brand like ourselves on the stances we take, I think there's a certain respect that we get for actually taking a stance without focus testing to make sure it's going to be accepted by everyone. There's definitely a lot more, safe campaigns we can get behind, like breast cancer awareness. But, if you really want to kind of drive progressive change, you have to take a stance where not everybody's going to agree with you. But as my grandfather said, think and act 10 years ahead. 10 years from now, you look back and these stances we take and, they're going to be the ones that people said, wow, that was a turning point for a better society, better earth. And that's where we try to be.
I really love that quote. I think that's fascinating, and I do believe it's important. Especially right now, given the inaction of the federal government, and we're not going to make this a conversation about politics, even though it's probably impossible to not weave that loosely into the narrative. I heard a quote yesterday that said CEOs have become the fourth branch of government. And I thought that was very interesting given the fact that we're seeing some really unprecedented moves from, again, private companies. We're seeing the private sector put more pressure than ever on the government in terms of what we deem to be ethical. And I think that's a really interesting turning point in the conversation around consumerism and capitalism and how that conversation has evolved. And, I couldn't think of two better guests to be actually having this chat with, because both Bronners and Seed, represent what's possible when you do take that kind of unfiltered approach to taking a stance. Is it going to win the hearts of everyone? Probably not. Is it going to really build loyalty, though, with the consumers that message resonates with? 100%. There's also some data that was recently released from Nielsen that said 63% of consumers expect brands to take a stance on purpose-driven initiatives that they're passionate about. So this is not just about, crisis management when it comes to PR and having something to say. It's about having, accountability and taking actionable steps, whether that's in initiatives that you're supporting or the messages are amplifying. Jeanine, I'm also curious to hear how you responded to some of the events that unfolded in 2020 revolving around, systemic racism and social injustice in the country.
So I think I have been a big believer of that innovation comes from people with passion and not necessarily comes through large sort of corporations. So the name of my company is called The Lab. It stands for Little American Businesses. And 30 years ago, we really believed in that the smaller companies needed an opportunity to grow. And again, that philosophy came from being in the surf industry. And I would honestly have to say, the fun part of the industry for me was building these brands from zero and having them become these international brands. And I just feel like the bigger we got, the less cool we were in a sense, because the shift went from sort of the cultural aspects of the industry to really trying to satisfy every quarter through Wall Street because we're a public company. And I think that's where we saw a lot of shift happen in the surfing industry, for example, because the focus wasn't just, the sort of the core product. But so I think with that said, today we have developed 49 projects. Every single one of our projects works with small businesses. We do not do any national tenants. We have hundreds of restaurants and coffee houses and so forth. We haven't done one Starbucks deal, So it's, for me, again, still today, 30 years later, the excitement is, people that are passionate about a product and put product together. So I know it's a long answer to your question, but I think basically we're putting our belief system in helping smaller organizations sort of realize their dream. And Seed People's Market, by the way, is still off the same philosophy. We have a lot of crafters in there. We work with a lot of local makers. We call it localization, personalization, and customization as opposed to homogenizations. And every one of the companies that and products that we've developed, all 49, work off of, what our core company philosophy, which is, the 4 C's. And I think when each time we look at a project, if it doesn't meet it within those framework of the 4 C's, we just don't do them. And that is community. Every project we do has to have some sense of community or community support. Culture, commerce, obviously, and consciousness. And so, again, being in the development side of the business as well. It's really hard for us to go in and plop in a 200,000 square foot retail center without having the community involved, without being sustainable, it has to meet all those criteria. You can't just go build this stuff in the middle of the night, particularly these days. So I think it's a combination of all of that that's sort of at least where we've arrived as an organization.
So it sounds like your approach to quote unquote social justice is more of an economic empowerment strategy, which is, again, bringing small businesses to the forefront, giving them the opportunity to grow and to be part of something larger, which again is interesting. And again, I love the 4 C's and consciousness being a part of that. And I know that obviously is also a big piece of the puzzle for Dr. Bronners as well, this idea of almost an awakening. And I do feel like we've been in the midst of a collective awakening. Shaheen, I'd also like to use that as a segue to talk about mental health and wellness, because you mentioned that that's a really important factor as well when it comes to the health and the wealth of the community. Obviously, this has been, again, a very, unusual year, and we've seen a lot of highs and lows, a lot of lows. But I'd love to know during this time of uncertainty, when there is this heightened sense of anxiety, specifically in a community, from your consumers, how are you supporting your community's health and wellness? Are you offering... is there virtual opportunities there? Are you staying in touch with them, checking in on them? Are you offering them any kind of access to services within the community? We do know that consumers are actually looking to brands and retailers more than ever to kind of, again, fill that gap that the federal government isn't fulfilling. So I'm wondering if there's anything specific you can speak to there that the lab is providing.
It's a wonderful question. Quite honestly, I've thought about this. I think, if we're referring to 2020, which was a pretty sort of surprising and devastating year on a global basis, I don't think any of us expected that. So I'm not sure if we as a company had anything within our business model that would sort of expected that. But having said that, again, I think I go back to just sort of core philosophy and core belief system. We're a family-owned company, and there's obviously the internal part, and there's the external, meaning our community and customers. And internally, we have about 250 employees, and we've always been family-oriented, and we totally believe in the sort of the Google way of doing business. If you want to bring your dog, if you have to take time off with your baby. I think the luxury of running an organization like ours, that we can do that without having to go to a board or HR department and try to adopt new policies. So I think for us, it's just all happened, quite honestly, organically. And even today, if you're not comfortable, you can work out of your house. If you do want to come in because you missed the interaction, then you can come in and so forth. I think from the standpoint of our community and our customers, again, I can use a couple of our projects as an example. And the camp, let's go with the camp because that's where Seed People's Market is. So we were the first yoga studio in Orange County back in 2002. And today there's free yoga services. We offer yoga for our customers. We were the first vegan restaurant, and that's still there, obviously. And so I think the vegan community has their own group of people, and they find ways of sort of bringing those people together, whether it's with vegan Thanksgiving dinners or vegan, keeping healthy. So there's a lot of communication in terms of, again, people that subscribe to those beliefs. Our own Seed People's Market, we still continue to have workshops, and many of them are outdoors, and whether it's industry films or it's demonstrations on climbing or what have you, and we can still hold a lot of this outdoors. Most everything we offer in that sense, whether they're educational programs or just bringing community back together in a safe way, are free. And we do that across the board with our other projects as well. So I think for us, it's basically just being there for them and them meeting our consumers and sort of support them in the areas that they need support. And that's really what's important right now. I think it's really more about that relationship than trying to sell or shove more product out the door.
So it sounds like, again, you've really set yourself up for success here, because it's been built into the DNA of the brand since day one. And you're so fortunate to have that foresight, because you don't have to reverse architect it into who you are and what you stand for. It's part of your mission. And I think that's so unique, especially if you think about some of the things you mentioned, Shaheen, being the first yoga studio, being the first vegan restaurant. I mean, that's pretty like progressive and forward thinking. Obviously Southern California is a little bit more flexible and open to that, but it is really worth noting that you are ahead of your time there. I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the initiatives that Dr. Bronners has been working on over the last few years. I mean, quite literally pushing legislation forward that specifically targets mental health and wellness in a very out-of-the-box capacity. Maybe you can speak to that a bit more.
Sure. And what you're referencing to is our fight to make psychedelic medicines available for people in need, because there really is a lot of trauma out there that psychedelics can really help in a controlled setting. But first, I would like to just talk about this, kind of the climate around COVID, and the way that it affected our business was much different than it affected others. Most people had their demand just crashing. We sell soap and sanitizer, so we had the opposite, where just demand went through the roof. And so our critical issues became one of supply. You talk about community need, and we were shorting orders left and right when it came to hand sanitizer, because everybody needed it. And the priority of our company is not just to seek out business opportunity, but to address community need, right? So what we did with the sanitizer that, we were constantly telling customers we can't produce enough, you can only be rationed this much. We always reserved 4% of all sanitizer that we made, and we allocated that to at-risk communities, people of need, usually in the inner city, and people on the front lines, especially healthcare providers and whatnot. As sanitizer became more available to people on the front lines, then that 4% always went to people of need. So, we could have obviously sold every drop we made, but we made sure that over 100,000 bottles went out to people who might not be able to have it otherwise. But
and how do you approach making a decision like that internally? Is it just like a no-brainer? This is what we have to do. Is this like the tenets of considered capitalism, or is it something?
I mean, this is all happening at a time where we're not sitting down and completely strategizing this out usually, but what you said, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's it's like when we come up with the idea of where can we have the most impact, and when we find where that is, then we act immediately. And we have very good alignment between all stakeholders of the company to really down to the person making the soap, to the person filling the soap, from the very bottom to the very top. We try to instill that sense of purpose and alignment, so that it's not just, I'm filling a bottle of hand sanitizer. It's like, no, I'm saving people's lives, right? This is a vital product. So it allows us to kind of quickly align and pivot. The no-brainer part is like, should we do it? The brains come in when it comes to like, well, how?
Well, it's also interesting that both you and Shaheen, you both come from family-owned businesses, and it's very intimate, and everyone's very hands-on. And I'm wondering if that also plays a role in that more empathetic approach to thinking about your consumers and your community as perhaps even maybe extensions of your own family.
I, I, I think that's very true. I think that's very true. I think, especially a family like ours, I'm not intimate with Shaheen's family, but a family like ours, we have, somebody like my brother who is, extremely forward thinking, visionary, definitely, the Burning Man type, so to speak. I guess myself, who's maybe a little more buttoned down, but pretty much 85% the same as my brother, the 15% that people notice. And then you have somebody like my mom, who is very conservative, who is our CFO, who's very fiscally conservative, just really wants to see, the dollars and cents of everything, extremely compassionate, but is, as I say to people, she still pays me and my brother's allowance, even though we bought the company from her. That you have just these different personality types who are in this family, who have, different points of view, different types of people can identify with, these different people. There's also my brother-in-law who is our COO, who's, very systematic oriented type. And, everybody that works for us and everybody in our community can see in at least one of us, somebody that they extremely empathize with. And so it's a way of kind of focusing the message or bringing people in, because they come in from like all these different places. So for us, that's
really cool.
I think family really comes in, and we have absolute trust. No matter how much we argue, I've never gone home mad at my brother.
Okay, so let's move into the what you didn't see coming section of the conversation, which is unexpected events having a lasting impact on your business and the industry. And obviously, COVID-19 came out of left field. Personally, everything was going great for me in Q1. And then as Q2 started to creep up, things just started to get a little rocky and the bottom kind of fell out. So, Michael, you spoke to how that was actually really an opportunity for your business, which happens to be a provider of hand sanitizer and soap. Can't say that. I'm sure a few of us are jealous of that. In the room. Shaheen, I'm wondering how, as a retailer, I'm sure you had a very different experience once COVID really quarantining, sheltering in place, once that really started to set in. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you responded to those early, few weeks and months of the pandemic?
Well, I think obviously we got hit hard, and again, as I alluded to earlier, I didn't have it in my business plan. There was no such thing in my world, so I think it definitely took us by surprise. And look, we dealt with it. Again, I think, to be honest, as hard as we got hit, I am still a believer if there is anything positive that might come out of the COVID situation, is that I think it's going to recalibrate many of our businesses and or industry product segments. I think most of us realized that the country was over retailed. I mean, there was a lot of mediocrity out there, and I'm really looking at it just in terms of sort of a national situation. I think I'm sort of the anti-mall guy. So for 30 years now, I felt that malls were somewhat obsolete, and I think department stores, that model seems to be obsolete. And looking at the sort of the food industry, which is a big part of our business, I promise that every CEO of a national food chain is behind closed doors trying to figure out, what does the world look like now? I mean, because a lot of these brands, quite honestly, had lost touch with the consumer. I think what's interesting is that the products and the goods and services that were really good and connected to the community and that were authentic, they've all done great. I think Michael's example is a great example. I think if he wasn't in the business he was in and he didn't have the authenticity, I'll give his mom the credit. He couldn't have just slipped into the sanitizing business. So I think many companies are going to benefit from this when things do clean up, and I really think this is sort of the true test of who's real and who's not. It's I also feel what's happened is it's in I think with everything said and done and pre-COVID, America represents 4.5% of the global population, and we still consume 25% of goods and services. So I always jokingly said, if this was the Olympics, we get the gold medal for consumption. And there is so much of our consumption that's still just stuff. I think what's happened today with what I call the next generation and early adopters is again products with a purpose and things that we really need. Now, I feel that the COVID has really expedited that. And, if we, I try to follow and keep on top of, what's selling and what's not selling and what trends are. And it's interesting that during the pandemic, people bought things that are personal to them, that are important to them. And they consumed less stuff or things that they would consume normally to impress their friends, for instance. And so all of the authentic, well, I think we all know that the hard good business has actually done quite well. And those are all personal items. And I know the products that we sell in our store, it seems like anything that's personal or functional or has a purpose has actually done really well. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that it was mandatory for us to shut down our retail stores and now operate at 20%, I think we would kick butt, because the consumer is there, the demand is there for those products. So I really feel this, going through this purification process at many different levels of our culture and industry. I really believe in that. So I think after pandemic, it's just going to be a much more focused, more authentic, and I think it's going to, as a society, it's going to realign us with things that are really important to us. Not, by the way, and that goes from product to relationships.
It's interesting because there has been just such a spike. I mean, consumers are still shopping, right? They're just shopping differently. They're shopping for essentials. They're shopping for things that, again, matter to them and don't necessarily fit into the box of maybe what we've considered to be luxury in the past. We've written extensively about how you define luxury or how consumers are defining luxury as we enter into 21. And, time is luxury, access to the outdoors is luxury, these purposeful things that we wouldn't have necessarily, lumped in with something more frivolous or exciting are actually becoming the drivers of most of the purchases that consumers are making. I'm actually really curious about how you were set up for e-commerce, because a lot of the success stories that we've heard come out of 2020 from brands that have been thriving specifically have been because they were ready to pivot to e-commerce and taking a more omni-channel approach to everything from communications to just digital engagement. How did that fare for you? Were you ready for that?
That's an interesting question. My personal philosophy is that we're a locally based community center and store. And I think the main purpose for me is to service the local community. And part of the service is the experience and the high touch opportunities. Much of the product we sell and many of our customers are fairly intelligent, and they ask intelligent questions, and they want important and intelligent information about the product. Again, we're not in the sort of, Forever 21 business, where it's disposable. And quite honestly, for me, I think it's always been difficult to really be able to have that relationship on the internet. And so I quite honestly have looked at the internet as I kind of treat it like a dating site where, I want to meet someone and I want to meet our consumers, but to have a meaningful relationship, we want them to come in. So once they meet and they like our philosophy, our way of life.
So you're not interested. You're not interested in speed dating. You want a long lasting relationship.
Exactly, and I think if the internet is a tool to introduce our culture and then bring the consumers in so that we can have a relationship, I think that's a great tool. Now, with that said, I still am believer of, I'm old school. I remember when I was on the product side of business, we used to travel around the world and I couldn't wait, for instance, in Tokyo, I couldn't wait to get into certain stores because, I couldn't go to London, Paris, New York and see that same store. It was only in Tokyo and I felt the same way about many other global locations. And I think today, as I mentioned earlier, I think the industry's just gotten so crowded, even with the luxury brands. I call the luxury brands airport brands because every international airport has a Gucci shop and a Paul Smith shop and a Prada shop and an Armani shop. So I think there's the excitement or that personal relationship is gone, for me. I know in parts of the world it's still very, very important. But so I think what I try to do is make this really a great, fun experience for them to come into the store. And we happen to then get also a lot of international because they know that they can't go to New York and go to a seed store, just the way we curate this store. Now, with all that said, to my surprise, pleasant surprise, we're up over 70% online. But it hasn't been, I don't want to say it hasn't been my wish, but I'm hoping that this 70% increase online will equate to all of those people that perhaps had not been in the store come and visit after COVID when we can be fully open. That's really the relationship that I'm looking for, as opposed to shipping more stuff through the back warehouse, because then it really puts me in sort of a commodity business. I also feel that the product that we're selling, they're personalized. I still personally have a hard time buying, if I'm going to spend $500 on a beautiful Patagonia or a Arc'teryx jacket, I really want to put it on. I want to feel the fabric. I want somebody to tell me, I want to buy the technology and I need someone to educate me on the technology. I don't necessarily need another jacket, but I think the idea is that if it's an improved technology and has improved features and I'm a, outdoors guy, I want to know about it. So again, it's more personal stuff. And I don't necessarily want to go click on the internet and sort of have it shipped to my house. So there's a lot of different relationships going on in our mind.
Well, I mean, my counter argument is always that for when people say retail is dead. It's like people want to have that in-person experience. I do genuinely believe you need to have a strong e-commerce and social commerce strategy in play because it really does need to be omni-channel. But brick and mortar is your absolute, that is where you come to meet and engage and learn about the needs of your consumers and really just fine tune the experience for them. And again, going back to your point about, of items that have more of an emotional value or significance or monetary value or significance or however you define those, you're not going to necessarily add something like that to the cart just on a whim. You want to go in, you want to feel it, you want to shop it, you want to be romanced by the purchase. And I do believe that we can't really 100% experience that just from an e-commerce, kind of perspective. I want to just hang out for a second in the outdoor space, since we are, talking to the outdoor retailer community. Outdoor participation and sales in certain categories has increased by up to 500% in some cases, despite COVID-related challenges. And obviously, we're seeing more people than ever get outdoors, for the first time. And it's really exciting and it's really interesting, and it opens up the opportunity to engage with a new non-endemic or novice consumer that maybe doesn't know a ton about the outdoor space. I'm actually really interested in asking Michael, Dr. Bronners obviously has always been on my shelf in my bathroom, but I think it's also new to some outdoor enthusiasts and consumers. And I'm wondering, at a certain point, you were kind of seen as a newer, kind of a new player in the space. And I'm wondering, how you were received by the community and what that looks like when other brands are actually trying to connect with the outdoor space in this very authentic way.
Well, the funny thing, Jeanine, is that we always had two streams of customers going back to the 1960s. There were hippies or kids of hippies, and there were people in the outdoors. So that actually goes back to the 60s and 70s. I was born in 75. I grew up in a conservative part of Los Angeles at the time called Glendale. So one of the people who knew our soaps, so were my friends, either had a hippie for a parent or they used it outdoors, right? Both of those. And it was only until like the 90s when kind of the green natural space kind of integrated more with mass market. And then, we started going more to the outdoor space more consciously, that kind of brought everything together. But it was a constant challenge sometimes to talk to people in the outdoor space when I would say, hey, do you know Dr. Bronners? And they're like, yeah, it's great. It's the soap I camp with. I'm like, and I would say to them, well, why don't you use it at home in your shower? And they're like, but it's a soap I camp with. And it was as if, like, here's this soap that's such a part of the outdoor experience, the tingling peppermint and the smell of the lavender and, just the feel of the outdoors. And they don't want to ruin that by, like, showering on a Tuesday morning before going into the office. Like, that's special. So it's kind of that we had to, bring things together holistically so you can use it both outdoors and at home. And it was in 2002 that we first made overtures into the outdoor space, I believe, maybe 2003 or 4, that we started going to the Outdoor Retailer Show. And what was great about that show was, people only knew us for our peppermint liquid soap for the most part. And so we were able to educate them on all the other stuff we do and talking about the impact that we make as a company and how, for example, this year, 10% of all revenue is going to charity and activism, environmental goals, social goals. We were able to kind of, show them that, it's not just Dr. Pepper or Dr. Bronner, it's a family, it's real. And for the outdoor industry in particular, authenticity is key. And I'll never forget a person coming from, more of the natural products industry. That first outdoor retailer show was such an epiphany, because at the natural products shows, you hand out samples and people will just take as many as they want. And I'm sorry, it's kind of the dark side of natural products industry. People take a lot of samples. And when I went to the outdoor retailer show, I would try to give somebody a sample of the soap and they're like, no, I'll pay for that. I'm like, no, please take it. And they're like, okay, well, I'll take it, but I promise I'm going to go to K2. I'm going to climb the mountain. I'm going to take a picture with this and I'll send it to you. And this is, of course, before the internet, and I didn't know anything about influencers, of course, at the time, not before the internet, before social media. I'd be like, sure, that's so nice of you. But just that, it was always such a real intimate relationship we had with customers in the outdoor retail space. And that's what I found that they're really looking for, not flash in the pants, advertising, talking about youth and beauty and, dreams of, unrealistic dreams, but really of just, what is real? What does this soap do? How will it affect my life? How will it take care of the environment? How will the company that I support give back and make this a better place. And I think if that's one thing to tell people entering the outdoor space is be yourself, be authentic, be real, a real message, because otherwise people in that space will see right through it and, look for something else that hits all those buttons.
The anecdote you shared about people not wanting to kind of cross-pollinate their outdoor experience with their home shower experience, that actually really hits home for me because I have absolutely tried to separate the two, and I didn't actually realize what a visceral connection the scent and the essential oils that are part of the formula, like the role that they played in connecting me to that outdoor space. And it actually really made me think about it.
Well, it's really interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but, we get emails from people who, especially when they found our products. One of the first crossover markets we sold into was Trader Joe's. And Trader Joe's, it was a lot of people who knew our soaps from the 60s, and they were hippies, but then they stopped going to natural stores. They became yuppies. Then they became soccer moms, NASCAR dads, empty nesters. And then, in the year 2000, they find our product in Trader Joe's and they think, oh my gosh, where has this soap been all my life? And of course, we always were in the natural sector, outdoor sector. And we didn't go anywhere. They just made that journey. And so we'd get all these emails from people saying, oh, I just took a smell of your soap and it took me back to my first love in high school. Her hair used to smell of peppermint. And you really realize just that visceral connection people have to aroma and scent. And, what you talk about, the outdoor experience, that's definitely true.
So that brings us to the what's next component of our conversation, which is where we'll leave you guys today. And these are unique opportunities for your business and the industry in 2021 and beyond. So unfortunately, there's actually no official COVID-19 playbook in existence. If there is, let me know. I'd love to subscribe to it. Jeanine, Michael, any advice for brands or retailers trying to plan for what's next? Is that possible to plan for what's next? And what is the most effective way, I guess, to insulate yourself from what's on the horizon?
Well, I
Maybe we can start with Jeanine.
Share some thoughts on that. Obviously, every industry is going to have a different reaction, but I would say in some ways, very fortunate to be in the outdoor industry. And it's a very simple equation for me. I think during this past 10 months and soon to be year, I think people have, as I mentioned earlier, realigned what's important to them. And one of the things, obviously, is mental health. I think this is an opportunity for us as an industry to basically bring in new customers. I think the core customer that was there before because they were into the outdoors or climbing or surfing or hiking, I think obviously that customer is not going to go away. But I do think that people are now, in California, gyms are closed. So people are starting to go outdoors and walk. And all of a sudden, hey, I want to take a hike. I've got 3 boys, they're all in their 20s. And they're, they lift weights and they do all kinds of stuff. But they haven't been hikers, and it's amazing that's what they do now. They all hike. So next thing you know, you're exposing people to the outdoors. I think I really look at it as an opportunity. It's a new relationship with the outdoors at any aspect. And I think what's really important about our industry is not only that it's kept up with technology and we continue to innovate and come up with new product, but I do think that the industry is not basically isolated to age or a particular person. I think you could be at any age and you can enjoy the outdoors. I think for our store, our camping department, quite honestly, has just done really well because I think most of us know everybody that had the opportunity went out and bought a camper or rented one and took their families on the road. I think a lot of these memories and a lot of these attitudes are going to continue and they're going to stay. And so many of these outdoor activities perhaps were with the core customer. This was their hobby. And I think today, in post-COVID, it's going to become part of the lifestyle. Again, it's not just sort of a physical situation, replacing a lot of the gyms, perhaps. I also think that there's a real appreciation for sort of the mental health part of this. So it's a realignment and a new relationship with the outdoors, and I think that could mean that just would be a very meaningful relationship for any of us in the industry.
Sure. To kind of echo the common sentiments, the COVID crystal ball is cloudy indeed. It's very difficult to predict exactly when it will end, and it's very difficult to predict when another big crisis like COVID will happen. I mean, you can definitely educate yourself on trends, but something like COVID, you need to pretty much arm your company and your culture with the way that you can manage such a crisis. And, I like to refer to Dwight Eisenhower, who, of course, was a president. And before that, he led the Allies in World War II. And he has a quote that says, plans are useless. Planning is everything. And that was no truer than this year. You go back a year to when we planned 2020, and we had all these grandiose ideas for all these events and these in-store activations, that everything just went poof, right? And everything pivoted online, everything pivoted virtually. We had to reconstruct our business, and we had to, for us, it was fortunate we had more demand because we're an essential business, but then, we lost a lot of our supply, and so had to deal accordingly. And the key for us to get through it, and I think the key for any business to get through any downturn, upturn that happens unexpectedly, is really to have a culture of alignment and purpose throughout the entire operation, so that you're able to pivot when it's necessary, and you're not like a train where the front's going one way and the back's going the other way, right? But you're more like a race car or whatever, or a big a boat that can turn on a dime. And I like to refer to this other story I heard of JFK, who went to NASA when they were doing the moon program back in the 1960s, and he encountered a janitor who was who was mopping up the floor, and JFK goes to the janitor, "So what do you do?" And the janitor says, "I'm putting a man on the moon." And that's really what needs to happen is that sense of purpose, no matter how rote manual the work is, from the person like in our company who's filling bottles of soap, who's putting labels on soap, up to the people who are, in the front office, CEO, and my brother, myself. It's that, we're not just making soap. We're not just putting a cap on soap. We're fighting for a better world. We're fighting for regenerative organic, a form of agriculture that can bring carbon back into the ground where it belongs and mitigate climate change. We want our people to think that way. And when you have that, then you have the ability to pivot when you can. And I realize it's for some companies it's easier than others, but that's the best advice I can give. So in a truly sustainable company, everything connects. And for us, one of the things I like to say is that, we're sustainable from the root to the fruit, which means, we know the farmers at the very beginning of our supply chain. We know how they're treated. We know how they're paid. Money goes to their communities in order to bring development to everyone, and onward through like those materials turning into oils that then turn into our soap that then go into the hand of the customers and then are used out in nature. The cycle is complete, and we're very conscious of every hand that touches our product. And our VP of Special Ops, Garrett Lasone, is just written a book called Honor Thy Label, and it's about a journey to a green, sustainable, fair trade supply chain. And that will be coming out on March 7th, and it will give you an intimate look about how, we went on this goal to really know who our coconut farmers were, palm oil farmers were, and ensuring those, among others, were grown sustainably, that we brought a new way of doing business where, you have a capitalist model that returns investments, not just to the farmers, but into a fund for their communities. But how do you do it, right? It's a pipe dream for a lot, but for us, we went through a lot of failures. and successes before coming to something really viable. And for those of you who are interested, it's out March 7th, Honor Thy Label by Dr. Garrow Lasone.
And that brings us to the end of our session today. I feel like we just started to scratch the surface, and I wish I had more time with Michael and Jeanine, but I'm sure they'll be available if you need them in the future. Thank you again for everyone who tuned in, and I look forward to seeing you again in real life at the next outdoor retailer in Denver. Have a good day, everybody. Thanks. Bye.
Peace.
So this year, I thought, why not get into shipbuilding instead of getting an Icon Pass? I just find shipbuilding so relaxing. Definitely don't regret not getting an Icon Pass. Shipbuilding's way better.